I died once. In the winter of 1881, when I lowered Sarah and Annie into the ground, my heart stopped beating. But this stubborn body kept breathing, kept walking, kept working like a machine without a soul. Until this morning, when I saw her. The Dakota Territory sun pressed down like a blacksmith's hammer at high noon. Heat shimmered off the prairie grass in waves that made the horizon dance and blur. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I watched the same figure I'd been watching for 4 months now, walking the same path she walked every morning and every evening. Rosa Delgado, 24 years old, 8 months pregnant, carrying 2 wooden buckets on a yoke across her shoulders, 3 miles to the creek, 3 miles back, every single day. I'd been watching her through my brass telescope, telling myself it was just surveillance, just keeping an eye on my territory the way any sensible rancher would. But that was a lie, and I knew it. I watched her because something about her stubborn refusal to break, to quit, to ask for help, reminded me that human beings could still endure without destroying themselves in the process. I needed to see that, every morning, every evening, proof that survival was still possible. This morning she collapsed, not a stumble, not a careful lowering to the ground. She dropped like a sack of grain thrown from a wagon, both hands clutching her swollen belly, the buckets tumbling away and spilling precious water into the thirsty earth. She lay there in the dirt, perfectly still, except for the rise and fall of her chest, each breath looking like it took everything she had left. My legs were running before my mind caught up to what I was doing. I hadn't run for anyone in 3 years, hadn't cared enough about another human being to move faster than a walk. But now I was taking the stairs 3 at a time, bursting through the front door, running for the stable where my horse stood already saddled, because I always kept him that way, ready for emergencies I told myself would never come. The ride took less than 10 minutes, but felt like an hour. When I reached her, I dropped from the saddle before my horse fully stopped, hitting the ground on my knees beside her motionless body. Her eyes were closed, her lips were cracked and bleeding from the heat. Her dress, once probably white, was now the color of Dakota dust and stained dark with sweat. But what stopped my heart was her belly, that impossible roundness that contained a life that had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with why I was here, on my knees, reaching for her with shaking hands. When I touched her shoulder, she jerked like I'd burned her with a branding iron. Her eyes flew open, wild and terrified, not looking at me with gratitude or relief, but with pure fear, the kind of fear that comes from experience, not imagination. She said something in Spanish I didn't understand. No otra vez. The words came out broken, desperate. Then, in English, barely a whisper, please, not again. I pulled my hand back, held both palms up where she could see them. I'm not here to hurt you. You're dying of heat stroke. Just let me help you. She tried to push herself up, got halfway to sitting before her arms gave out. The second time she tried, she made it to her knees, swaying like a sapling in a strong wind. I don't need your pity, Mr. Crow. So she knew who I was. That shouldn't have surprised me. Everyone in Cedar Falls and 20 miles beyond knew Thaddeus Crow, the rich widower who lived alone on the hill and hadn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone since his wife and daughter died. Not pity, I said, keeping my distance, keeping my hands visible, just water. I walked back to my horse, pulled my canteen from the saddle, and set it on the ground between us. Then I mounted up, turned the horse around, and started to ride away. Wait! I stopped but didn't turn around. Why? Her voice was stronger now, angry. Why help me? You've been watching me for months. I see the light from your window every morning when I start walking, every evening when I come back. You watch, but you never help. So why now? I did turn then, looking back at her over my shoulder. She'd managed to get to her feet, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other shading her eyes against the sun. Even exhausted, even 8 months pregnant and nearly dead from heat stroke, she stood like she was ready to fight. Because you fell, I said. Before, you were walking. Walking meant you were strong enough to refuse help. But falling? Falling meant you were dying, and I've seen enough people die. I rode away before she could respond, but I heard her call after me. I still don't need your charity, Mr. Crow. Good, I called back without turning around, because I'm not offering it. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my front parlor with all the lamps extinguished, drinking whiskey in the dark, and thinking about the fear in Rosa Delgado's eyes when I touched her. That wasn't the fear of a woman worried about propriety or reputation. That was the fear of a woman who'd been hurt before and expected to be hurt again. I knew that kind of fear. I'd seen it in the eyes of men during the war, soldiers who'd been captured and tortured and somehow survived to make it back to our lines. They flinched at sudden movements. They couldn't sleep without a weapon in their hands. They looked at everyone like enemies until proven otherwise. Rosa Delgado had that same look, and it made me wonder what had happened to her beyond just being abandoned by a husband who'd left her pregnant and alone in one of the harshest territories in America. Around midnight, I heard horses, 3 of them, moving fast, coming from the direction of Rosa's homestead. I stood and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see the road that ran past my property. 3 riders, pushing their horses hard, heading toward town. Something in my gut clenched tight. I grabbed my gun belt from where it hung by the door, strapped it on, and headed for the stable. Whatever had happened, those men riding at midnight meant trouble. By the time I reached Rosa's cabin, dawn was starting to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Her door hung open, swinging slightly in the morning breeze. No smoke came from the chimney. No sound came from inside. I approached slowly, my hand on my revolver, every sense alert for danger. "Mrs. Delgado?" No answer. I stepped through the doorway and stopped. The interior was a single room, barely big enough to turn around in. A narrow bed against one wall, a rough table with 2 mismatched chairs, a trunk in the corner, and a small stove that hadn't been fired in days, judging by the cold ashes. Rosa sat on the edge of the bed, a shotgun across her lap, both hands gripping it so tight her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes were red from crying, but dry now, filled with something that looked like resignation mixed with defiance. "They came for me," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "2 men. Said they worked for someone named Stone. Said my husband owed money. $800. Said I had 3 choices. Pay the debt, go with them, or give them the homestead." She looked up at me then, and I saw the exhaustion in every line of her face. "I told them I don't have money. The homestead isn't worth $800, and I'm not going anywhere." What did they say to that? They said Mr. Stone has other uses for a woman in my condition, that there are places where a pregnant woman can be worth more than $800 to the right buyer. My blood went cold. I knew what she meant without her having to spell it out. The territories had laws about debtor servitude that were supposed to protect creditors, but men like this Stone twisted those laws into weapons. A woman alone with debts she couldn't pay could legally be forced into servitude until the debt was cleared. And men without conscience found ways to profit from that servitude that had nothing to do with honest work. "They said they'd be back tonight," Rosa continued, "to collect, one way or another." I should have walked away. Should have told her to contact the territorial marshal, to file papers, to handle this through legal channels. But legal channels took time, and time was something Rosa Delgado didn't have. Those men would be back in less than 12 hours, and if they took her, legal channels wouldn't help her at all. "No, they won't," I heard myself say. She looked at me, confused. "What?" "They won't be back to collect, because you're not here. You're at my ranch, as my wife." The words hung in the air between us like gunsmoke after a shot. Rosa's eyes went wide with shock, then narrowed with suspicion. "Your wife?" "Yes. We've never even had a conversation longer than 5 minutes. You don't know anything about me, and now you want to marry me?" "Want has nothing to do with it. It's the only legal protection that will work. A married woman can't be taken for her husband's debts if she has another husband. If we're married, legally, you're under my protection. Stone's claim becomes invalid." Rosa set the shotgun aside carefully and stood up, moving around the small cabin like a caged animal looking for escape routes that didn't exist. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Crow? Besides the satisfaction of playing hero to a desperate Mexican woman?" The bitterness in her voice cut deeper than she probably intended. "I get reminded that I'm still human, that I can still make choices that aren't about profit or property, or just surviving one more day. For 3 years I've been living like a ghost. When I saw you fall yesterday, I felt something. And if I don't hold on to that feeling, I'm afraid I'll disappear completely." She stopped pacing and turned to look at me, really look at me, searching my face for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have been enough, because some of the tension left her shoulders. "The baby," she said quietly. "It's not Tobias's child. The man I was married to, he's not the father. I need you to know that before you make this offer." "I know. I can count months as well as anyone." "And you still want to do this?" "I don't want to do anything, but I'm going to, because it's right, and because I haven't done anything right in a very long time." Rosa walked to the trunk in the corner, opened it, and pulled out a faded photograph in a cracked frame. She held it out to me. The image showed a younger Rosa, maybe 19 or 20, standing beside a tall man with dark eyes and an easy smile. Behind them, 2 more people, another man and a woman who looked like she could be Rosa's mother. "That's Tobias," she said, pointing to the man beside her. "My husband. And that's his brother Carlos, and my mother Lucia. This was taken 5 years ago at our wedding." She turned the photograph over. On the back, written in careful script, were 4 names and 4 dates. Next to Carlos's name, a date from 4 months ago. Next to Lucia's name, a date from 2 years before that. Next to Tobias's name, no date. "Carlos is dead," she said. "My mother is dead. Tobias is gone, and I don't know if he's alive or dead. The baby is Carlos's child, but not by choice, not by my choice." The implications of those words settled over me like a cold rain. I didn't ask for details, didn't need them. What mattered was that Rosa had been hurt in a way no woman should be hurt, and the child she carried was a daily reminder of that hurt. "Does Stone know?" I asked. "I don't know. Tobias killed the man who did this to me. That man was Lucas Stone, Garrett Stone's son. So yes, this is about more than $800. It's about revenge." We rode back to my ranch as the sun climbed higher, Rosa sitting behind me on my horse, both of us silent with the weight of what we were about to do. When we reached the house, I helped her down and led her inside to the guest room. Clean sheets, a proper bed, a window that looked out over the prairie. "Rest," I told her. "I'm riding into town to make arrangements. We'll marry tomorrow morning if you're still willing." "Tomorrow morning," she repeated, like she was testing the words to see if they were real. Then, "Mr. Crow, why are you really doing this?" I paused in the doorway. "I had a brother once, twin brother, Garrett. We fought in the war together, Union Army. At Gettysburg he took a Confederate bullet meant for me, fell down a cliff in the chaos of battle. I looked for him for 3 days, found nothing, assumed he was dead. I've lived with the guilt of that for 21 years, knowing he died in my place, and I couldn't even find his body to bury him proper." "I'm sorry," Rosa said softly. "Every day since, I've wondered what I could have done different, how I could have saved him. And every day I've done nothing to honor his sacrifice except survive. When I saw you yesterday dying in the heat because you're too proud to ask for help, I thought maybe this is my chance. Maybe I can't bring Garrett back, but I can make sure someone else survives who deserves to." I didn't wait for her response, just closed the door and headed for the stable, because if I stayed any longer, I might have said more, might have admitted that I was just as lost and desperate as she was, just better at hiding it. The ride into Cedar Falls took an hour. Main Street was quiet at mid-morning, just a few women doing their shopping at Hutchkin's General Store, a couple of ranchers loading supplies into their wagons. I tied my horse outside the Justice of Peace's office and went inside. Judge Morrison was a dried-up old man who'd been dispensing territorial justice for 30 years. He looked up from his desk when I entered, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Thaddeus Crow didn't come to town often, and when he did, it was usually for supplies, not legal matters. "Mr. Crow, what brings you to my office?" "I need a marriage license." His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Marriage license? Well now, that's unexpected. May I ask who the fortunate lady is?" "Rosa Delgado." The surprise on his face shifted to something else. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "Mrs. Delgado, the Mexican woman out on the eastern homestead, the one whose husband ran off and left her." "That's her." Morrison leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "Mr. Crow, I have to ask, are you aware of Mrs. Delgado's situation? Her condition?" "I'm aware she's 8 months pregnant and alone and being threatened by debt collectors. That's all I need to be aware of. There's talk in town about the child, about whether it's really Tobias Delgado's baby or something else." I planted both hands on his desk and leaned in close. "Judge Morrison, I don't care about town talk. I care about legal documents. Can you issue a marriage license or not?" He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I can. But Mr. Crow, you should know that Garrett Stone was in town 2 days ago, asking questions about the Delgado homestead, about debts owed. He's not a man who takes kindly to interference in his business." The name hit me like a physical blow. I straightened up, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. "Garrett Stone? You know him? What does he look like?" Morrison frowned at the urgency in my voice. Tall man, thin, long scar down the right side of his face, from his forehead to his jaw, voice like gravel, eyes that look like they've seen too much and enjoyed none of it. The room seemed to tilt around me. Tall, thin, scar on his face. That could describe 1,000 men who'd survived the war and come west to forget. But the name, Garrett Stone. Stone could be any name, a name taken to start fresh, to leave the past behind. But Garrett was not a common name, and the coincidence was too perfect, too terrible to be random. "This Garrett Stone," I said, my voice coming out rough. "How long has he been operating in the territory?" 2, 3 years maybe. Came up from Texas, made a name for himself as a man who always collects his debts one way or another. 3 years. About the time I would have stopped looking for news about my brother, stopped hoping he might have survived somehow. "Issue the license," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow morning with Mrs. Delgado. Have everything ready." I left before Morrison could ask any more questions, my mind racing. It couldn't be him. Garrett had died at Gettysburg. I'd searched for 3 days. If he'd survived, he would have found a way to let me know. We were twins, closer than most brothers. He wouldn't have just disappeared, unless he blamed me, unless he thought I'd abandoned him on purpose. I rode back to the ranch faster than I should have, pushing my horse harder than was wise. When I arrived, I found Rosa sitting on the front porch, looking out over the prairie. She'd changed into a clean dress, had washed her face and hands. She looked young sitting there, too young to be carrying the weight she carried. "It's done," I told her. "We marry tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. She nodded slowly. "Mr. Crow, can I ask you something?" "Thad, if we're going to be married, even if it's just for legal protection, you should call me Thad." "Thad, then. This brother of yours, Garrett. If he were alive, if he came back, what would you do?" The question cut too close to the bone. "Why are you asking?" "Because I see guilt in your eyes when you talk about him. The same kind of guilt I see in the mirror when I think about Carlos. And I need to know if you're doing this to save me or to save yourself from your guilt." I sat down on the porch step, suddenly too tired to stand. "Maybe both. Does that matter?" "Yes, because if you're just trying to ease your conscience, you'll resent me eventually. But if you're doing this because you actually see me as a person worth protecting, then maybe we have a chance at making this work." I looked up at her, at this woman who'd survived things I couldn't imagine, and still had the strength to demand honesty from the man offering to help her. "I see you, Rosa. I see someone who walks 6 miles a day in killing heat rather than ask for charity, someone who faced down debt collectors with a shotgun, someone who's still fighting even though the world has given you every reason to quit. That's not guilt talking. That's recognition. You remind me of what strength actually looks like. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'll be ready. That night I stood watch on the porch with my rifle across my knees. Stone's men didn't come, but I knew they would eventually. Men like that didn't just give up because their target had moved. They'd find out Rosa was here, and they'd come to collect, one way or another. Around 3 in the morning, I heard the bedroom window open. Rosa appeared, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. She sat down beside me without saying anything, and we watched the stars together in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me about your wife, Sarah." "Why?" "Because I need to know what I'm walking into, whether you're going to spend our whole marriage comparing me to a dead woman." Fair question. Painful, but fair. Sarah was steady. That's the word that always comes to mind. Steady and kind and patient with my rough edges. She never complained, not once in 10 years of marriage. Not when I came back from the war with nightmares. Not when we lost 2 babies before Annie was born. Not when ranch life turned out to be harder than she'd imagined. She just endured. You loved her. I loved her. For 16 years, through war nightmares and lost babies and harsh winters, she was patient with all of it, never complained. But loving her was easy because she made it easy. You won't make it easy, Rosa, and that's good. Easy makes you soft, makes you forget how to fight. I don't want easy anymore. Easy makes you soft, makes you forget how to fight. Rosa pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. The baby kicks hardest at night, like she knows it's the only time I'm sitting still enough to notice. She? I think so. I hope so. Boys grow up to be men, and men are the ones who cause all the trouble in the world. I almost smiled at that. Can't argue with that logic. We sat there until the false dawn started painting the eastern sky. Then Rosa stood, touched my shoulder briefly, and went back inside. I stayed on the porch, watching the sun come up, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the first right decision in 3 years. At 9:30 the next morning, we rode into Cedar Falls together. Rosa wore a simple gray dress that Mrs. Hutchkins had sold her, no veil, no flowers, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was, a marriage of necessity. A legal arrangement to protect a woman who'd run out of other options. Judge Morrison had the papers ready. He read through the ceremony quickly, his voice flat and businesslike. No poetry, no promises about love and cherishing, just the legal requirements. "Do you, Thaddeus Crow, take Rosa Delgado to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I looked at Rosa, saw the fear and hope warring in her eyes. "I do." "And do you, Rosa Delgado, take Thaddeus Crow to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She hesitated, just for a second, long enough for me to wonder if she'd change her mind. Then, "I do. God help us both. By the power vested in me by the Dakota Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Crow, you may kiss your bride." I didn't kiss her, just took her hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, and that was enough. That was more than enough. We signed the papers. Morrison witnessed them, and just like that, Rosa Delgado became Rosa Crow, legal and binding in the eyes of territorial law. We were walking back to where I'd tied my horse when a voice stopped me cold. "Thaddeus Crow, been a long time, little brother." I turned slowly, knowing what I'd see before I saw it, knowing and dreading it in equal measure. A man stood in the middle of the street, tall and thin, wearing a long coat despite the heat. A scar ran from his right eyebrow down across his cheek to his jaw, pulling his face into a permanent half-smile that held no warmth. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and they were looking at me with an expression that mixed rage and pain and bitter satisfaction. "Garrett," I whispered. "Surprised to see me? Thought you'd killed me at Gettysburg? Or did you just stop looking because it was easier to believe I was dead? Rosa's hand tightened on my arm. She could feel me shaking, could sense that something had just broken open that couldn't be closed again. "You were dead," I said, my voice barely working. "I looked for 3 days. No one could have survived that fall. But I did survive, barely. Confederate patrol found me half dead and took me prisoner. Spent 2 years in Andersonville prison camp. You know what they did to Union soldiers there, Thad? Want me to describe it?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. This was impossible. Garrett had died 21 years ago. I'd mourned him, lived with the guilt of surviving while he didn't, built my whole life on the foundation of that loss. And here he stood, alive, twisted into something I didn't recognize but couldn't deny. "Nothing to say?" Garrett took a step closer. "All these years, and you don't even have an apology ready? That's cold, brother. Even for you." "I didn't know," I managed. "I swear to God, Garrett, I didn't know you were alive." "No, you didn't know because you didn't care enough to keep looking. 3 days, Thad. You gave me 3 days, and then you went home. Married Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I'd been writing letters to for 2 years, had a kid. Built yourself a nice life on top of my grave." The words hit like physical blows. Sarah had known Garrett first, had received his letters during the war, but when the news came that he was dead, she'd turned to me for comfort. And that comfort had turned into something more. "Sarah didn't know either," I said. "None of us knew. Doesn't matter now. She's dead too, isn't she? You and your daughter both. Fever took them, I heard. Funny how fate works out sometimes." The casual cruelty in his voice made my hands clench into fists. "Don't talk about them." "Why not? You took everything from me, Thad. My life, my woman, my future. Fair's fair if I take a little interest in your losses." Rosa stepped forward then, placing herself slightly between me and Garrett. "Mr. Stone, we don't want any trouble." Garrett's cold eyes shifted to her, and I saw recognition dawn. "Well now, this must be the famous Mrs. Delgado, except you're Mrs. Crow now, aren't you? How convenient. Married this morning, if I'm not mistaken." "The marriage is legal," Rosa said firmly, "which means your claim on my debts is invalid." "My claim isn't about debts anymore, Mrs. Crow. It's about justice. You see, your former husband Tobias killed my son, Lucas, shot him dead for what Lucas did to you, and I don't take kindly to people killing my family, no matter what the reason." The pieces clicked together in my mind with terrible clarity. Lucas Stone had been Garrett's son, the man who'd hurt Rosa, and Tobias had killed him, which meant Garrett had even more reason to want revenge than just collecting a debt. "Your son was a rapist and a murderer," Rosa said, her voice shaking but clear. "Tobias did the world a favor." Garrett's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold as winter. "See, that's where you're wrong. Lucas was just being a man, taking what he wanted. But that's beside the point now. The point is that I came here to collect a debt and found something much more interesting. I found my dear little brother who left me to die and then stole my life." He looked at me again, and I saw the depth of hatred there, burning like a coal fire that had been banked for decades but never gone out. "So here's what's going to happen, Thad. I'm going to give you a choice, just like you gave me a choice when you decided 3 days was enough time to look for your twin brother." "What choice?" I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "3 options. First, you give me Mrs. Crow here. Let her settle the debt the old-fashioned way. You get to keep your ranch, your money, your comfortable life. Second, you pay me $2,000, double what's owed, and we call it even. Or third, we settle this like men, you and me, guns drawn, just like the old days. Winner takes everything. Loser takes nothing on account of being dead." Rosa grabbed my arm. "Don't listen to him. We can go to the territorial marshal, get legal protection." But I knew better. The territories were only as civilized as the men with the fastest guns made them. Legal protection meant nothing if Garrett decided to take what he wanted by force. "I need time to think," I said. "You have 3 days," Garrett replied. "Same amount of time you gave me at Gettysburg. 3 days from now. High noon right here in Cedar Falls. Come alone, come armed, and come ready to finally pay for abandoning your brother." He turned and walked away, his long coat stirring up dust with each step. I stood frozen, watching him go, my mind reeling from the impossibility of what had just happened. My brother was alive. My brother hated me. My brother wanted me dead. And the woman I'd just married to protect her was caught in the middle of a blood feud 21 years in the making. Rosa's voice brought me back to the present. "Thad, we need to leave. We need to go now." I looked down at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and realized she thought I might actually consider Garrett's first option, might actually hand her over to save myself. "We're going home," I said, "both of us, and we're going to figure out how to survive the next 3 days." We rode back to the ranch in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, I helped Rosa down from the horse and led her inside. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded over her swollen belly, staring at nothing. "You're thinking about running," I said. "I'm thinking about a lot of things. Running is one of them. Don't. Running won't solve this. He'll find you wherever you go." "Then what do you suggest? Because from where I'm sitting, every option ends badly. If you fight him, you might die. If you don't fight him, he'll keep coming after us. And if you pay him, that's $2,000 you probably don't have just lying around." She was right. The ranch was worth far more than $2,000, but most of that value was tied up in land and livestock. Liquid cash was harder to come by. "There's a fourth option," I said slowly. "What?" "We face him together. Not with guns, with truth. Garrett's been carrying hatred for 21 years because he thinks I abandoned him. If I can make him understand what really happened, maybe we can end this without bloodshed." Rosa looked at me like I'd suggested we try to reason with a wounded bear. "You think you can talk him out of wanting revenge? After 21 years? "I don't know, but I have to try. He's my brother, Rosa. Even twisted up with hate and bitterness, he's still my brother. I owe him that much." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Tell me what happened at Gettysburg. All of it. Because if we're going to face him, I need to understand what we're walking into." So I told her about how Garrett and I had enlisted together, fought together, survived 2 years of war side by side. Told her about Gettysburg, about the chaos and confusion of that battle, about the Confederate sharpshooter who'd taken aim at me, and how Garrett had pushed me aside and taken the bullet meant for me, about how he'd fallen backward off a cliff in the chaos, and I'd watched him disappear into the smoke and confusion, about how I'd searched for 3 days through fields full of dead and dying men, calling his name until my voice gave out, about how I'd finally given up, accepted that he was gone, and started the long journey home. "I didn't abandon him," I said, my voice rough with old grief. "I looked until there was nowhere left to look. But the war didn't stop just because I lost my brother. Eventually, I had to choose between staying there and dying myself, or going home and living with the guilt." "And Sarah?" Rosa asked gently. "Sarah had been writing to Garrett during the war. When news came that he was dead, she wrote to me instead, to offer condolences, to share her grief. We started corresponding, and after the war ended, I went to Kansas to meet her. We married 6 months later." "Did you love her? Or did you marry her because she was supposed to be Garrett's?" The question cut deep because I'd asked myself the same thing 1,000 times. I loved her. Not at first, maybe. At first, she was just a connection to Garrett, a way to hold on to him. But over time, real love grew. She was good and kind and patient with my grief, and I'd like to think I made her happy, at least for a while. Rosa reached across the table and took my hand. "I believe you, and I think Garrett probably believes it too, somewhere under all that anger. But belief and acceptance are different things. He might understand what happened and still want you to pay for it." "Then I'll pay, with my life if that's what it takes, but not with yours. You and the baby are not part of this debt." "We're part of it whether we like it or not," Rosa said. "The moment you claimed me as your wife, you made us part of your life, and that means your fights are our fights now." She stood up with some difficulty, one hand supporting her back. "I'm going to rest. This baby has been kicking up a storm since we left town, like she knows something bad is coming." After she went upstairs, I sat alone in the growing darkness, thinking about choices and consequences. 21 years ago, I'd made a choice to stop looking for Garrett. It had seemed like the only choice at the time, the only way to preserve my own sanity and survival. But that choice had created a debt I was only now being called upon to pay. The question was whether the payment would be in blood or something else, whether there was any way to face my brother across the gulf of years and hatred and find something worth saving on the other side. I didn't have an answer, but I had 3 days to find one. The first night after seeing Garrett, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair beside my bedroom window, watching the darkness, my rifle across my knees. Every sound made my hand tighten on the stock. Every shift of wind through the grass made my heart jump. I was waiting for Garrett to come in the night, to finish what he'd started in town with something more permanent than words, but he didn't come. The night passed quietly, broken only by the normal sounds of the prairie and the occasional cry from Rosa's room when the baby kicked hard enough to wake her. Around dawn, I heard her door open and footsteps on the stairs. I met her in the kitchen, where she was trying to light the stove with shaking hands. "Let me," I said, taking the matches from her. She didn't argue, just sank into one of the kitchen chairs with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I kept dreaming about him. Your brother. Except in the dreams, he had Lucas's face, Lucas's hands. Garrett won't hurt you. Whatever else he's become, he won't hurt a pregnant woman. You don't know that. You don't know what he's capable of anymore." She was right. The Garrett I'd known had been quick to laugh, slow to anger, protective of anyone weaker than himself. But 21 years of bitterness could change a man beyond recognition, could turn protectiveness into cruelty, righteousness into revenge. I got the fire going and put coffee on to boil. We sat in silence while the sun came up, painting the kitchen in shades of gold and amber. Outside, my ranch hands were already moving around, starting the day's work. They knew better than to come to the house uninvited, had learned over the past 3 years that Thaddeus Crow preferred solitude to company. But today, one of them approached anyway. Young Billy Henderson, Mrs. Hutchkins's nephew, who helped with the horses. He knocked on the doorframe, hat in his hands, looking nervous. "Mr. Crow, sorry to bother you, sir, but there's a man here to see you. Says he's family." My stomach clenched. "Where is he?" "In the yard, sir. Said he'd wait there until you were ready." I looked at Rosa. She nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. "Go. I'll be fine here." I grabbed my gun belt and strapped it on before stepping outside. Garrett stood in the center of the yard, hands loose at his sides, wearing the same long coat despite the early morning warmth. In daylight, the resemblance between us was unmistakable. Same height, same build, same dark hair now shot through with gray. We could have been looking in a mirror, except for the scar that twisted his face and the hardness in his eyes that I hoped wasn't reflected in my own. "Morning, brother," he said, the word dripping with sarcasm. "Thought I'd come see this famous ranch of yours, the one you built while I was rotting in a Confederate prison." "What do you want, Garrett?" "Want? I want a lot of things. I want the 2 years I spent in Andersonville back. I want the life I should have had. I want Sarah alive and in my arms instead of dead in the ground. But since I can't have any of those things, I'll settle for watching you squirm for the next 3 days. He walked slowly around the yard, examining everything with the careful attention of a man taking inventory. "Nice place. How many acres?" 8,000. 8,000. And how many cattle?" "Around 2,000 head." 2,000 head of cattle on 8,000 acres. Must be worth a fortune. All built on the foundation of my sacrifice. You ever think about that, Thad? How every dollar you've made, every comfortable night you've slept, every moment of happiness you've had, all of it was bought with my suffering? That's not fair. Fair? Garrett spun around, and for the first time, I saw real emotion crack through his cold facade. "You want to talk about fair? I took a bullet meant for you." I fell into hell and clawed my way back out. And when I finally made it home, you know what I found? A letter from Sarah telling me how sorry she was for my death, and how happy she was with her new husband, my brother, my twin, the man I'd died to protect. "I didn't know," I said again, knowing it wasn't enough, but having nothing else to offer. "Garrett, I swear on Annie's grave, I didn't know." The mention of my daughter's name made him pause. "Annie, that was her name? Your little girl?" "Yes, she was 6 when the fever took her. Same age Lucas was when his mother died. Funny how life works out. We both lost children. Except I lost mine first, lost everything first, and you still got years of happiness before fate caught up with you." He moved closer, close enough that I could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard that matched my own. Close enough to see that underneath the bitterness and rage, there was still pain. Raw, unhealed pain that hadn't faded with time, but had instead calcified into something harder and more dangerous. "I have a proposal," he said quietly. "A way to settle this that doesn't involve guns." "I'm listening." "I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to lose everything and know it's your own fault. So here's the deal. You give me the ranch, all of it, the land, the cattle, the house, everything. You sign it over to me, and I let you and your new wife walk away with your lives. Start over somewhere else, the way I had to start over. And if I refuse, then we meet in 3 days and one of us dies. Maybe both of us, if we're evenly matched. And your widow gets to bury another husband and raise a bastard child alone in country that doesn't want her." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just the demand itself, but the calculated way he'd designed it to hurt maximum damage. The ranch was all I had left of the life I'd built with Sarah. Giving it up would mean erasing every trace of her, of Annie, of the years we'd spent together. But keeping it might mean leaving Rosa alone and unprotected, might mean dying and accomplishing nothing except adding another body to the long list of casualties from a war that should have ended 21 years ago. "I need to think about it. You've got 3 days. Use them wisely." He started to walk away, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Thad, that baby your wife is carrying, when's it due?" "Why?" "Just curious. Seems like bad timing, getting married to a woman about to give birth, unless there's something else going on. Unless maybe you married her for reasons that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with legal protection from debt collectors. That about right?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He could read the truth on my face. "Thought so, which means this whole marriage is a sham, a legal trick. And legal tricks can be undone, brother. Think about that while you're considering my offer." This time when he walked away, I let him go. Stood there in the yard until he disappeared down the road, wondering how a reunion I dreamed about for 21 years could turn into a nightmare so quickly. When I went back inside, Rosa was standing at the window, one hand pressed against the glass. "I heard some of it. He wants the ranch. He wants everything. The ranch is just the price he's putting on my continued existence. Are you going to give it to him? I don't know. If I give him the ranch, we have nothing. We'd have to start over somewhere else with nothing but the clothes on our backs and whatever we could carry. But if I fight him, I might die. And if I die, you're alone again. Worse than alone, because now you're a widow twice over, and Garrett would still have a claim on you through Tobias's debts." Rosa turned from the window, her face set with determination. "Then we need a third option. Something that doesn't involve you dying or us losing everything." "I'm open to suggestions." "Talk to him, really talk to him. Not in the middle of town with an audience, but privately, brother to brother. Make him understand that what happened at Gettysburg wasn't abandonment. It was survival." "You think he'll listen?" "I think he's been carrying this hatred for 21 years. That's a long time to hold on to anger. Part of him must be exhausted from it. Part of him must want relief, even if he doesn't know how to ask for it." It was a slim hope, but it was more than I had 5 minutes ago. "And if he won't listen? If he's too far gone?" Rosa walked over and took my hands in hers, looking up at me with eyes that had seen too much suffering but somehow still held hope. Then we face him together. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what marriage means, isn't it? Even a marriage that started as a legal arrangement. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. I went through the motions of running the ranch, but my mind was elsewhere. Rosa moved through the house like a ghost, preparing meals neither of us ate, washing clothes that didn't need washing, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. On the second night she went into labor. It started just after sunset. I was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal when I heard Rosa cry out from the house. By the time I reached her, she was doubled over in the kitchen, both hands clutching her belly, her face pale with pain and fear. "It's too early," she gasped. "Still 3 weeks. Something's wrong." I helped her upstairs to the bedroom, sent Billy racing into town to fetch Mrs. Hutchkins, who delivered half the babies in the territory. Then I did the only thing I could do. I stayed with Rosa, held her hand through the contractions, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, and tried not to show my own terror. Mrs. Hutchkins arrived within the hour, took one look at Rosa, and immediately started issuing orders. Water, clean towels, more light. She examined Rosa quickly, then turned to me with a grave expression. "The baby's coming tonight, whether we're ready or not. It's small, being early, but sometimes small babies are stronger than you'd think. You need to prepare yourself for any outcome, Mr. Crow. Any outcome. Meaning Rosa might die, the baby might die, both might die, leaving me alone again in this house full of ghosts." "Do what you can," I said, my voice rough. "Whatever you need, just do it." The next several hours were the longest of my life. I paced the hallway outside the bedroom, listening to Rosa's cries of pain, Mrs. Hutchkins's calm instructions, the sounds of struggle and suffering that came with bringing new life into the world. At some point, I found myself praying, something I hadn't done since Annie died, bargaining with God the way desperate men always do. Take anything else, just not this, not her, not now. Around midnight, I heard a different sound, a thin, angry wail that could only be one thing. Mrs. Hutchkins opened the door, a small bundle wrapped in blankets in her arms. "Mr. Crow, meet your daughter." Daughter. The word hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at the tiny face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in protest at being forced into the cold world. She was impossibly small, her skin almost translucent, but her cries were strong and furious. "Rosa?" I asked. "Exhausted but alive. She wants to see you both." I followed Mrs. Hutchkins into the room. Rosa lay propped against pillows, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her face pale but smiling. When she saw me holding the baby, her smile widened. "She's beautiful," Rosa whispered. "Isn't she beautiful? She's perfect." I carried the baby over and placed her carefully in Rosa's arms. Watching them together, mother and child, I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been frozen since Sarah and Annie died. Not quite love yet, but the possibility of it, the permission to hope again. "What should we name her?" Rosa asked. "Lucia, after your mother." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "You remembered. I remember everything you tell me." We sat there in the quiet aftermath of birth, the three of us, while Mrs. Hutchkins cleaned up and Billy rode back to town. Outside, the night was peaceful. Inside, something new had been created, not just a child but a family, fragile and imperfect, and held together by necessity more than love, but a family nonetheless, which made what happened next even more devastating. The sound of a horse approaching fast woke me just before dawn. I'd fallen asleep in the chair beside Rosa's bed, my hand still holding hers. The baby was asleep in a drawer I'd padded with blankets, the closest thing we had to a cradle. I went to the window and saw a rider coming up the road at a gallop. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, I recognized the long coat, the way he sat his horse. Garrett. I met him outside, my rifle in my hands. He dismounted slowly, and I saw that he was different somehow. The cold arrogance from yesterday was gone, replaced by something else, something that looked almost like uncertainty. "I heard," he said without preamble. "The baby came early. Mrs. Hutchkins's nephew told everyone in town. Is she alive?" "Rosa or the baby?" "Both." "Both alive. A girl, born around midnight." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "Can I see her?" "Why?" "Because—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. "Because Lucas's mother died in childbirth, died bringing my son into the world, and I've spent 20 years blaming that baby for killing her, hating my own son because he was alive and she wasn't. Maybe that's why he turned out the way he did. Maybe he felt that hatred every day of his life, and it twisted him up inside." This was the most human I'd heard Garrett sound since he'd reappeared, the most like the brother I remembered. "You want absolution. You want to see the baby and feel something good so you can forgive yourself for failing Lucas." "Maybe. Or maybe I just want to see if it's possible to look at a newborn and feel something other than rage and regret. Can I or not?" I should have said no, should have sent him away and kept my family safe behind locked doors. But something in his voice, some echo of the brother he used to be, made me step aside. 5 minutes, and if you upset Rosa or the baby, I'll kill you myself. Brother or not. He followed me upstairs. Rosa was awake, nursing Lucia, and she tensed when she saw Garrett in the doorway. But she didn't scream, didn't demand he leave, just watched him with wary eyes while she held her daughter. Garrett approached slowly, like a man approaching something sacred and dangerous in equal measure. He stopped a few feet from the bed and looked down at the baby in Rosa's arms. "She's so small," he said quietly. "She came early, but she's strong." "What's her name?" "Lucia, after my mother." Garrett nodded slowly. "That's a good name, a strong name." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Mrs. Crow, I owe you an apology for the things I said about Lucas, for what he did to you. A father should raise his son better than that, should teach him that strength isn't about taking what you want from people weaker than you. I failed at that. Failed at a lot of things." Rosa's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Stone, we all fail. The question is what we do after the failure, whether we let it make us bitter or make us better." Wise words from a woman who's been through hell. Hell teaches wisdom, if you survive it. Garrett looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since Gettysburg. Uncertainty, vulnerability, the real Garrett, underneath all the armor he'd built up over 21 years. "I came here to destroy you," he said. "Came here planning to take everything you have and leave you with nothing, the way I was left with nothing. But standing here looking at this baby who doesn't know anything about war or betrayal or 21 years of hatred, I'm not sure anymore. Not sure if revenge is worth it. Not sure if it ever was." "So what are you saying?" I asked carefully. "I'm saying I need more time. The deadline I gave you, 3 days, that was about forcing your hand, making you choose under pressure. But maybe that's not fair. Maybe neither of us should make permanent decisions while emotions are running this hot. How much more time? A week? Maybe 2. Time for me to think. Time for you to rest and take care of your family. Time for both of us to figure out if there's any way forward that doesn't end with one of us dead." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to reconciliation, but it was something. A crack in the wall of hatred. A possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way out of this that didn't require blood. 2 weeks, I agreed. "But Garrett, if you change your mind, if you decide you want to go through with the showdown, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Whatever happens between us, you leave Rosa and Lucia alone. They're not part of this fight. Never were, never will be." Garrett looked at Rosa again, at the baby in her arms, and something shifted in his face. "I promise. On whatever's left of my honor, I promise they'll be safe from me." After he left, Rosa and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally she spoke. "Do you trust him?" "I don't know. The Garrett I knew I'd trust with my life. But this Garrett, the one who's been forged in bitterness and loss, I don't know what he's capable of. Neither does he. I saw it in his eyes. He's at war with himself as much as he's at war with you." Lucia made a small sound in her sleep, and Rosa adjusted her carefully. "Thad, can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone?" "Anything." "When I was carrying Lucia, I hated her. Every kick, every movement, reminded me of how she came to be, of Lucas and what he did. I thought about ways to end the pregnancy, thought about drinking things or falling downstairs or just walking into the prairie and never coming back. I felt my throat tighten. What stopped you? I don't know. Fear, maybe, or stubbornness, or some small part of me that whispered this baby wasn't responsible for her father's sins, that she deserved a chance to be someone different, someone better." She looked down at Lucia with tears in her eyes. "And now that she's here, now that I can see her face and feel her breathing, I can't imagine my life without her. The hate is gone. All I feel is love." "You think Garrett can do the same? Can let go of his hate?" "I think he wants to. Wanting and doing are different things, but wanting is the first step." The next 2 weeks were strange ones. Garrett didn't come back to the ranch, but I heard reports from town about him. He was still there, staying at the boarding house, keeping to himself mostly. Mrs. Hutchkins reported that he'd been asking questions about me, about Sarah, about what my life had been like over the past 21 years. Not threatening questions, but curious ones, like a man trying to understand something that didn't make sense. I spent the time taking care of Rosa and Lucia, learning how to be a father again. Lucia was demanding in the way all newborns are, crying at all hours, needing constant attention. But there was something healing about it too, about having a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just surviving another day. Rosa grew stronger each day, regaining the color in her cheeks, the strength in her limbs. We fell into a routine that felt almost normal. I'd work the ranch during the day while Rosa cared for Lucia. In the evenings, we'd sit together on the porch, passing the baby between us, talking about small things. The weather, the cattle. Plans for planting a garden in the spring. We didn't talk about Garrett. Didn't talk about what would happen in 2 weeks when his self-imposed deadline arrived. We just lived in the moment. In the peaceful eye of a storm we both knew was still swirling around us. On the 13th day, Rosa asked me to teach her to shoot. "Why?" I asked, though I thought I knew the answer. "Because if something happens to you, I need to be able to protect Lucia. I won't be helpless again, ever." So I set up targets behind the barn and showed her how to hold the revolver, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. She was a natural shot, steady hands and good eyes. By the end of the afternoon, she was hitting targets from 20 paces. "Who taught you?" I asked, as we walked back to the house. "My father. He said every woman on the frontier should know how to handle a gun, said being a woman didn't mean being defenseless." Smart man. He was, right up until he wasn't. Got drunk one night and tried to draw on a faster gun. Left my mother and me alone when I was 16. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me that good men can make bad choices, and that those bad choices have consequences for everyone around them." The message was clear. Whatever I decided to do about Garrett, the consequences would fall on more than just me. On the 14th day, the day before Garrett's deadline, Thaddeus Delgado came back. I was in the barn when Billy came running, out of breath and wide-eyed. "Mr. Crow, there's a man at the gate. Says his name is Thaddeus Delgado. Says he needs to speak to Mrs. Crow." I found him standing just outside the property line, like he was afraid to step onto land that no longer belonged to him. He looked terrible. Thin and ragged, his clothes hanging off his frame, his face hollow with exhaustion and something that looked like sickness. "Delgado," I said, my hand on my gun, "you've got a lot of nerve showing up here." I know I got no right. But I had to come. Had to see Rosa. Had to know if she's okay. She's fine. Better than fine. She's my wife now." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. I heard about the wedding, heard about the baby. That's why I came. To give her this. He held out a rolled paper sealed with wax. Annulment papers, already signed by me and witnessed by a judge in Santa Fe. I'm releasing her from our marriage, making it legal so she can really be your wife, not just pretending for protection. I took the papers, suspicious. Why? What's your angle? No angle. I just want her to be free, free of me, free of the debts, free of everything I brought into her life. I loved her, Mr. Crow, still do. But love ain't enough when you can't keep someone safe. You can keep her safe, I know that now. Where will you go? Mexico, probably. Got family down there. Figure I can start over where nobody knows my name or my debts. He looked past me toward the house. Can I see her, just for a minute? Just to say goodbye proper? I considered refusing, sending him away without that closure. But Rosa deserved to face her past, to put it behind her on her own terms. Wait here. I went inside and found Rosa in the kitchen, Lucia sleeping in her arms. When I told her Tobias was here, her face went pale. What does he want? To see you, to say goodbye. He brought annulment papers. Our marriage can be real now, if you want it to be. She looked down at Lucia, then up at me. Do you want it to be real? I asked you first. That's not an answer, Thad. I took a breath, knowing this was a moment that would define everything that came after. When I married you, it was to protect you. That's still true. But somewhere along the way, especially these past 2 weeks, it became more than that. You're not just a responsibility anymore. You're my wife. And I'd like that to be real, if you're willing. She smiled, soft and sad at the same time. Then I should probably face my past so I can move forward into the future. We went out together, Lucia still in Rosa's arms. Tobias's eyes went straight to the baby, and I saw the moment he understood that this child wasn't his, had never been his, would never be his. She's beautiful, he said quietly. Her name is Lucia, Rosa said, after my mother. That's a good name. He swallowed hard. Rosa, I came to say I'm sorry for leaving you, for not being strong enough to stay and fight, for all of it. You killed Lucas for me, Rosa said. That took strength. Killing's easy when you're angry enough. Staying and facing the consequences, that's the hard part. And I wasn't strong enough for that. Where will you go? South. Somewhere far enough away that Stone's reach doesn't extend. Somewhere I can start over and maybe become the man I should have been for you. Rosa shifted Lucia to one arm and reached out with her free hand. Tobias took it, and they stood there for a moment, two people who'd once promised forever and learned that forever was a luxury neither of them could afford. Be safe, Rosa said. Be happy, Tobias replied. Then he looked at me. Take care of them. They deserve better than what I gave them. I intend to. He walked away then, back to his horse tied down the road, and we watched him ride south until he disappeared into the heat shimmer. Rosa leaned against me, and I put my arm around her shoulders. Do you regret it? I asked. Marrying him? I regret how it ended. But I don't regret trying. Sometimes the trying is all we have, even when it doesn't work out. That night, I signed the annulment papers as a witness, making Rosa's freedom from Tobias complete and legal. Then I asked her a question I'd been wanting to ask for days. Rosa, will you marry me again? Not for protection this time, for real, for all the reasons people are supposed to get married. She looked up at me, Lucia asleep between us on the couch. Are you asking because Garrett's deadline is tomorrow, and you think you might die? I'm asking because I don't want to die without you knowing how I really feel, but I also don't want to pressure you into something just because I'm afraid. How do you really feel? Scared? Grateful? Lucky? Like maybe I've been given a second chance at something I thought I'd lost forever. Like maybe you're the reason I survived the past 3 years instead of just existing through them. Rosa reached up and touched my face, her palm warm against my cheek. Then yes, I'll marry you again. Tomorrow, after you face your brother. After we know we have a future to plan for. And if I don't survive tomorrow, then I'll raise Lucia and tell her every day about the man who chose to be her father when he didn't have to, who gave us his name and his protection and eventually his heart. We sat there in the lamplight until Lucia woke crying, hungry and demanding. And I thought about how strange it was that life kept moving forward even when death was waiting just around the corner. How babies needed to be fed and loved regardless of what tomorrow might bring. How the small daily acts of living were what made survival worthwhile. Tomorrow would come. Garrett would come. And whatever happened, at least I would face it knowing I hadn't wasted the second chance I'd been given, that I'd chosen love over fear, family over solitude, hope over the safe numbness of grief. That had to count for something, had to mean something. It had to be enough. I met Garrett at dawn, not high noon like he'd originally proposed. He was waiting at the edge of my property line, sitting on his horse, that long coat pulled tight against the morning chill. October in Dakota Territory meant frost on the grass and your breath visible in the air. Winter was coming early this year. I rode out alone. Rosa had wanted to come, had argued that we should face this together, but I'd convinced her to stay at the house with Lucia. Whatever happened between Garrett and me, it needed to happen between brothers, no witnesses, no audience to play to. He dismounted when he saw me coming. I did the same. We stood 20 paces apart, our horses between us and whatever came next. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Thought maybe you'd run, take your new family and disappear into the territories where I couldn't find you. That's not my way. Never was. No, running was never your style. You always faced things head on, even when you should have been smart enough to retreat." He paused. "That's why I looked for you at Gettysburg. Knew you wouldn't have left unless you thought I was dead. Knew you must have searched until there was nothing left to search." The admission hung in the cold morning air. I felt something loosen in my chest, some knot of guilt that had been tied there for 21 years. "I searched until the army forced us to move out. You know that. The war didn't stop for grief." "I know." Garrett looked down at his hands. "Spent 20 years telling myself you abandoned me on purpose, that you wanted me dead so you could have Sarah, have the life that should have been mine. But these past 2 weeks, thinking about it, really thinking instead of just hating, I realized something." "What?" "If our positions had been reversed, if I'd been the one searching and you'd been the one lost, I'd have done the same thing. Would have looked until I couldn't look anymore, then I'd have gone home and tried to live with the guilt. Because that's what soldiers do. We survive the best we can and carry the dead with us." I felt my throat tighten. Then why the threats? Why come here talking about taking the ranch, about dueling at high noon? Because I needed to hurt you, needed you to feel what I felt, but hurting you doesn't bring back the years I lost, doesn't undo Andersonville or the things they did to me there, doesn't make Lucas into someone I could be proud of instead of ashamed of. It just adds more pain to a world that already has too much. He pulled something from his coat pocket, an envelope, yellowed with age. "Found this in my things when I was going through them yesterday. Letter from Sarah, written right after the war ended. Never opened it because by the time I got it, I'd already heard she married you. Couldn't stand to read her explanation, her apology, her pity." He held it out to me. "But I opened it last night. Want to know what it said?" "Tell me." "She wrote that she'd gotten word I was dead from the army, that she'd mourned me proper, that she'd started writing to you because you were the only other person who understood what it was like to lose me, and that somewhere in all that shared grief, she'd found something worth living for. She wasn't apologizing for loving you. She was explaining that love grew from loss, that it wasn't a betrayal of me but a way of honoring my memory by taking care of the brother I'd died to save." Garrett's voice cracked slightly. "She wrote that she hoped wherever I was, I'd understand, that I'd forgive both of you, that I'd want you to be happy more than I'd want you to be alone. Did it work?" I asked quietly. "Did you forgive us?" "Not yet, maybe not ever, not completely, but I'm trying. Saw that baby of yours, saw how you looked at her and at Rosa, and I realized something. You're not living my life, you're living your own, and maybe that's what I need to do too. Stop living in the shadow of what I lost and start building something new from what I have left." He walked toward me slowly, and I tensed, my hand moving instinctively toward my gun. But he wasn't reaching for his weapon. He was reaching out his hand. "I'm leaving Dakota Territory," he said. "Going west to maybe California, maybe Oregon, somewhere far enough away that I'm not tempted to keep reopening old wounds. But before I go, I need to know. Can you forgive me? For the threats, for scaring Rosa, for trying to destroy what you've built?" I looked at his outstretched hand, at the brother I'd thought dead for 21 years, at the man he'd become through suffering I couldn't imagine. And I realized that holding on to anger at him would be just another way of staying trapped in the past. I took his hand. "There's nothing to forgive. You survived. That's all any of us can do." He pulled me into an embrace then, sudden and fierce. I felt him shaking, felt the years of pain and bitterness cracking open and spilling out. We stood there as the sun came up over the prairie, two old soldiers finally laying down the burden of a war that should have ended decades ago. When we pulled apart, Garrett's eyes were wet. "Take care of them. Your wife and daughter. Don't make the mistakes I made with Lucas. Love them enough to let them see your weakness, not just your strength." "I will." "And Thad, if you ever have a son, if you ever have another child, tell them about me. Not the monster I became, but the man I was, the brother who took a bullet for you. Let that be what survives. I promise." He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. I watched until he disappeared over the horizon, then turned and rode home to the family waiting for me. Rosa met me at the door, Lucia in her arms. The relief on her face when she saw I was unharmed made something warm bloom in my chest. "What happened?" she asked. "We talked, really talked, and then he left, headed west to start over." "Just like that? No showdown? No ultimatum? Just like that?" Turns out 21 years of hatred can dissolve pretty quick when you actually listen to each other instead of just yelling. She smiled, tired but genuine. "So what now? Now we live, really live, not just survive. Starting with a wedding, a real one this time." We married 3 days later in the same church where Sarah and I had married 12 years before. Mrs. Hutchkins decorated the pews with late-season wildflowers. Billy Henderson stood up as my witness. Rosa wore a dress that Mrs. Hutchkins had helped her sew, simple but beautiful, the color of prairie grass in summer. This time, when the preacher asked if I took Rosa to be my wife, I meant every word. This time, when I kissed her at the altar, it wasn't awkward or perfunctory. It was real. It was right. It was the beginning of something instead of just the continuation of survival. We had a small reception at the ranch afterward. 12 people, mostly neighbors who'd helped Rosa during those months when she was alone. They'd brought food and small gifts, and there was fiddle music and dancing on the porch as the sun set. I held Lucia while Rosa danced with Billy, laughing at his clumsy footwork. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the war. Peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something worth protecting, something worth building a future around. That night, after everyone left, Rosa and I sat on the porch with Lucia between us. The stars were brilliant in the clear October sky, so many you could barely see the darkness between them. "Tell me about the first winter," Rosa said quietly. "After Sarah died, how did you survive it?" "Barely. I worked until I was too exhausted to think. Then I slept until the nightmares woke me up. Didn't talk to anyone. Didn't go to town unless I had to. Just existed from one day to the next. And now? Now I have a reason to do more than exist. 2 reasons, actually." I looked down at Lucia, asleep in her mother's arms. 3, if you count staying alive, to spite everyone who thought I'd drunk myself to death by now." Rosa laughed softly. "Mrs. Hutchkins told me she had bets going in town about how long you'd last alone. Said most people gave you 5 years maximum before the solitude drove you mad." "What did you bet?" "I didn't. I was too busy trying to survive my own loneliness to worry about yours. And now we're surviving together. Better than surviving. We're living." The first winter as a real family was hard in ways I hadn't anticipated. The work of running a ranch in Dakota winter didn't stop just because I had a wife and baby to care for now. Cattle still needed feeding, fences still needed mending, pipes still froze and had to be thawed. But it was also easier in ways that surprised me. Having Rosa there to share the burden, to talk through problems, to remind me to eat when I got too focused on work. Having Lucia to come home to, her baby sounds filling the silence that had pressed down on me for 3 years. We fell into routines. I'd wake before dawn, start the stove, make coffee while Rosa nursed Lucia. We'd eat breakfast together, talking about the day's tasks. Then I'd head out to the ranch work while Rosa managed the house, the baby, the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning and mending. In the evenings, we'd sit together after Lucia was asleep, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. Rosa taught me Spanish words. I taught her to read the weather signs in the prairie sky. We learned each other slowly, the way you learn a new landscape. Carefully, respectfully, with attention to the details. Around Christmas, Mrs. Hutchins organized a barn raising for a neighbor whose structure had collapsed under early snow. Rosa insisted we go, despite the cold and the difficulty of traveling with a 3-month-old. "We can't hide on the ranch forever," she said. "People need to see us as a real family, not just a scandal they gossip about." She was right. The reception we got was mixed. Some of the women welcomed Rosa warmly, cooed over Lucia, asked about the ranch. Others were cooler, their greetings polite but distant. I heard whispers when we arrived. Mexican woman, married less than a year after her first husband left. Baby that doesn't look anything like either husband. But I also saw respect. Respect for Rosa's strength, for the way she held her head high and refused to be ashamed. Respect for me, for stepping up when most men would have looked the other way. During a break from the construction work, one of the ranchers approached me. Tom Brennan owned land south of mine, always been fair in his dealings. "Crow," he said, "wanted to say something about your wife." I tensed, ready to defend Rosa's honor if needed. "She's good people," he continued. "My wife says Mrs. Crow helped her with a difficult birthing last month, knew exactly what to do. Saved the baby's life, probably saved Martha's too. Anyone who can do that, I don't care where they're from or what their past looks like. Far as I'm concerned, you made a good choice." The tension left my shoulders. "Appreciate that, Tom. Just thought you should know, not everyone in this territory judges by skin color or circumstances. Some of us judge by character, and your wife's got plenty of it." That night, riding home with Rosa and Lucia in the wagon, I told her what Tom had said. She was quiet for a long moment. "I helped Martha because it was the right thing to do," she said finally. "But I won't lie and say the acceptance doesn't feel good. I've spent so long being judged, being found lacking, that having someone see me as just a person helping another person, it matters." "You're more than just a person," I said. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known, including Sarah." "That's a dangerous comparison. Are you sure you want to make it?" "I'm sure. Sarah was strong in her way, in her quiet endurance. But you're strong in a different way. In your refusal to break, in your willingness to fight. Both kinds of strength are valuable, but I think the second kind is what's needed out here." Rosa reached over and took my hand. We rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people have moved past the need to fill every moment with words. January brought the worst blizzard I'd seen in 5 years. Snow so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Wind so strong it tore shingles off the roof. For 3 days we were trapped in the house, unable to even make it to the barn to feed the horses. On the second day, Lucia developed a fever. I'd never felt terror like that. Watching her tiny body burn with heat, listening to her labored breathing, remembering how fever had taken Sarah and Annie. Rosa stayed calm, doing everything Mrs. Hutchins had taught her. Cool cloths, frequent nursing to keep fluids up, monitoring her breathing. But I couldn't stay calm. I paced the house like a caged animal, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if the fever spiked higher? What if it was something serious and we couldn't get to a doctor? What if I lost her the way I'd lost Annie? Rosa finally grabbed my arm on one of my circuits through the kitchen. "Thad, stop. You're making it worse." "How can I make it worse? I'm not doing anything." "Exactly. You're not doing anything except spreading panic. I need you calm. I need you focused. Can you do that?" I took a deep breath, forced myself to center. "What do you need?" "I need you to keep the stove going, keep water hot for cloths. I need you to trust me to handle this. Can you trust me?" "I can." And I did. Watched her care for Lucia with steady hands and calm efficiency. Watched her refuse to give in to fear even when the fever climbed higher. Watched her be the rock I needed when my own foundation was crumbling. The fever broke on the morning of the third day, just as the blizzard was ending. Lucia woke up crying, but it was a healthy cry, angry and demanding, not the weak mewling of the night before. Rosa slumped in the chair, exhausted but smiling. "She's going to be fine." I knelt beside the chair and put my arms around both of them. "Thank you for staying calm when I couldn't, for knowing what to do. This is what mothers do. We hold it together when everything's falling apart because someone has to. But Thad, next time, I need you to hold it together too. I can't be the only strong one. Not all the time." "You're right, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just be better." It was a fair criticism. I'd spent 3 years being strong only for myself, learning to survive alone. Now I needed to learn how to be strong for others, how to share the burden instead of assuming I had to carry it all. The rest of the winter passed more smoothly. Lucia grew stronger, starting to smile and coo, tracking movement with her eyes. Rosa bloomed in the role of mother, singing to Lucia in Spanish, telling her stories about her grandmother Lucia, teaching her the words for simple things, even though she was too young to understand. And I learned how to be a father again, how to hold Lucia without being afraid I'd break her, how to change diapers and warm bottles and walk the floor at 3 a.m. when she wouldn't sleep, how to find joy in the small moments, her first real laugh, the way she'd grab my finger and hold on tight, the peaceful weight of her sleeping on my chest. By the time spring arrived, we'd settled into something that felt like a real family, not the family I'd had with Sarah and Annie, but something different, something built on choice and effort rather than just the natural course of events. One warm April evening, Rosa and I sat on the porch while Lucia played with a wooden rattle I'd carved for her. The prairie was coming alive with new grass and wildflowers. In the distance, I could see my cattle grazing, fat and healthy after the hard winter. "Are you happy?" Rosa asked suddenly. "Why do you ask?" "Because I am. Happy, I mean, and it surprises me. After everything that happened, everything I went through, I didn't think happiness was possible anymore. But here I am, sitting on this porch with a man I love and a daughter I adore, and I'm happy. So I'm wondering if you are too." I thought about how to answer, about the complicated truth that, yes, I was happy, but it was a different kind of happiness than I'd known before. More complicated, more hard-won, built on loss and survival rather than simple contentment. "I am," I said finally. "It's not the same as it was with Sarah. That was easy happiness, the kind that comes from youth and optimism and not knowing how bad things can get. This is harder. It's happiness despite everything, happiness earned through survival, and maybe that makes it more valuable. Or maybe it just makes us older and wiser. Maybe both." Lucia dropped her rattle and started to fuss. Rosa picked her up, settled her on her hip. "She'll need to know eventually about Carlos, about how she came to be. How do we tell her that? How do we explain that her father was a monster but she's not? We tell her the truth, that she was born from violence but raised in love, that her origins don't define her destiny, and we make sure she knows that her real father, the one who chose her, loved her from the moment she was born." "You really see yourself that way? As her father?" "I do. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Choice does. Showing up every day does. I chose Lucia the day I asked you to marry me. Everything after that is just following through on that choice. Rosa leaned against me, Lucia between us. I got a letter from Tobias last week, forwarded from the general store. He's in Mexico City, working as a clerk. Says he's sober now, going to church, trying to be better. He asked about Lucia. What did you tell him? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Do we tell him she's well? Do we send him updates as she grows? Do we let him be part of her life in some small way? I thought about Garrett, about how absence and silence had festered into hatred over the years, about how maybe things would have been different if we'd found a way to communicate, to maintain connection even when circumstances pulled us apart. Tell him she's healthy and happy, I said. Tell him she'll know his name, and that he tried to protect you the best way he knew how. But make it clear that her life is here with us. He can send letters if he wants, but he can't come back and disrupt what we've built. That seems fair. Fair is complicated when you're dealing with people's hearts, but it's the best we can do. As spring turned to summer, the ranch prospered. Good rain, healthy calves, prices holding steady. I hired 2 more ranch hands to help with the increased workload. Rosa planted a garden that put my rough attempts from previous years to shame. Vegetables grew in neat rows. Herbs filled the air with fragrance. Flowers attracted butterflies that Lucia would watch for hours, transfixed by their movement. Mrs. Hutchkins became a regular visitor, bringing news from town and supplies Rosa needed for sewing. She'd hold Lucia and tell stories about the territory's early days, about surviving winters that made this past one look mild, about Indian raids and drought and all the ways the land tried to kill the people foolish enough to try to tame it. But you survived, Rosa said during one visit. All of you. How? By helping each other, by putting community before pride, by understanding that out here, none of us makes it alone. She looked pointedly at me. Some people forgot that for a while, got too wrapped up in their own grief to see that others were struggling too, but they're remembering now. She was right. I'd spent 3 years isolated, viewing other people as intrusions rather than connections. But Rosa had forced me back into the world, into barn raisings and church socials and the small daily interactions that made a community function. It wasn't always comfortable. I still preferred solitude to crowds, still found small talk exhausting. But I was learning that discomfort wasn't the same as harm, that pushing past my preference for isolation was necessary for building the kind of life I wanted Lucia to grow up in. In August, Rosa told me she was pregnant again. The news hit me like a physical blow. Joy mixed with terror in equal measure. Joy because this child would be ours, conceived in love rather than violence or duty. Terror because I remembered too well how pregnancy and childbirth could go wrong, how quickly joy could turn to tragedy. I'm scared too, Rosa said, reading my expression. But we can't let fear stop us from living. We survived this past year. We'll survive this too. When? Early spring, if I'm calculating right. March or April. 9 months to prepare, 9 months to make sure everything was perfect, to eliminate every risk, to control every variable. Except I couldn't control any of it, could only hold Rosa's hand and trust that this time fate would be kinder. The pregnancy progressed normally. Rosa stayed healthy, kept up with her work around the house and garden. Lucia, now nearly a year old, was walking and getting into everything. The ranch hands called her the little boss, because she'd toddle into the barn and point at things, making imperious sounds that we'd pretend to understand. In December, a letter arrived, from California, from Garrett. My hands shook as I opened it. Rosa stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. "Thad," it began, "I'm writing because I made a promise to stay in touch, and I'm trying to be the kind of man who keeps promises now." He wrote about California, about the land he'd bought near Sacramento, about learning to grow almonds, about the quiet pace of agricultural life after years of violence and chaos. He wrote about going to church for the first time since before the war, about crying during the hymns because they reminded him of our mother. And then he wrote about something else. "I met someone. Her name is Catherine. She's a widow with 2 young sons. We're taking it slow, but I think maybe this is what starting over looks like. Not forgetting the past, but building something new alongside it." He ended with a question. "How are you? How's Rosa and the baby? Are you happy, brother?" "I hope you are. I hope we both get to be happy, even after everything." I folded the letter carefully and put it in the desk drawer where I kept important documents. Should I write back? Of course you should. He's your brother. He's reaching out. Don't let pride or old hurt stop you from maintaining that connection. So I wrote back. Told him about Rosa's pregnancy, about Lucia's first steps, about the ranch doing well. Told him I was happy as a man with my history could expect to be. Wished him well with Catherine and her sons. It wasn't a long letter. Neither of us were good with words on paper. But it was honest. It was real. And it was a bridge between past and future, a way of acknowledging that blood ties didn't have to mean burden, that brothers could survive even terrible rifts and find their way back to something resembling peace. Winter came again, harsh but manageable. We were better prepared this time. More firewood stacked, more food preserved. The house was warmer, the relationship stronger. When Lucia got sick again in January, I stayed calm, helped Rosa instead of panicking, and Lucia recovered quickly, her resilience a testament to good care and strong constitution. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first hints of spring appeared, Rosa went into labor. This time, there were no complications. Mrs. Hutchkins arrived early, set up the bedroom with practiced efficiency, and 6 hours later, we had a son. "What should we name him?" Rosa asked, holding the baby while Lucia tried to climb onto the bed to see her brother. I looked down at my son, at his tiny, perfect face, at the impossibility of new life, and I knew there was only one right answer. "James," I said, "after the brother I lost, so his name lives on." Rosa smiled. "James Crow. That's a strong name, a good name." Over the next few months, our family grew into itself. Lucia adjusted to having a brother with typical sibling jealousy and affection. James was an easier baby than Lucia had been, calmer, sleeping longer stretches. Rosa bloomed in motherhood, handling 2 children with a grace that amazed me. I juggled ranch work with family time, learning to balance the demands of both. And slowly, day by day, moment by moment, we built the kind of life that seemed impossible that hot day when I first saw Rosa collapse in the prairie heat. A life built on choice and effort, on forgiveness and second chances, on the stubborn refusal to let past trauma define future possibility. One evening in late summer, almost 2 years after Rosa and I had married that first time, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Lucia was chasing fireflies in the yard. James was asleep in Rosa's arms. The air was warm and sweet with the smell of growing things. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Rosa asked. "If I hadn't collapsed that day, if you hadn't decided to help me?" "All the time, but not with regret, more with wonder. How did we get so lucky? 2 people who'd lost everything, who had every reason to stay broken, somehow finding each other and building this. It wasn't luck. It was choice. You chose to help me. I chose to trust you. We both chose to keep choosing each other even when it was hard." She was right. Love, real love, wasn't something that just happened to you. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice. And we'd built something strong enough to weather storms, internal and external. "I love you," I said. Not the first time I'd said it, but still new enough that each time felt like a small revelation. "I love you too, and I'm grateful for this life, for these children, for second chances and new beginnings." Lucia ran up to the porch, her hands cupped carefully. "Papa, look, I caught one." I bent down to examine the firefly glowing in her small hands. "Beautiful. Now let it go so it can find its family." She opened her hands and the firefly flew away, joining the dozens of others dancing in the twilight. We watched them together, my family, as the stars came out overhead and the prairie sang its evening song. I'd been given a gift that most people never got. A second life. a chance to start over after losing everything. And I'd learned that survival wasn't enough, that real living required courage and vulnerability, and the willingness to risk your heart again even after it had been broken. Looking at Rosa, at Lucia, at baby James sleeping peacefully, I knew that every risk had been worth it. Every moment of fear and uncertainty had led to this, to a porch full of family, to a future full of possibility, to a life that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. We sat there until the children needed to go to bed, then carried them inside to the house that had gone from mausoleum to home. And I thought about Garrett in California, starting his own new life, about Tobias in Mexico trying to become better, about all of us, survivors of war and loss and our own mistakes, trying to build something good from the rubble. Maybe that was what life was. Not the absence of tragedy, but the presence of hope. Not forgetting the dead, but living in a way that honored their memory. Not avoiding pain, but choosing joy despite it. I'd died once in the winter of 1881, but Rosa had given me life again, had reminded me that hearts could heal if you gave them time and care and the courage to try. And standing there in the doorway, watching her tuck Lucia into bed while James slept in the cradle I'd built with my own hands, I knew that this second life was the real one, the one that mattered, the one worth fighting for, the one I'd choose every day for as long as I had breath. And standing there watching the fireflies dance and my children sleep and my wife smile in the gathering darkness, I understood something I hadn't known at 20 or 30 or even 40. That second chances aren't given. They're built, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one moment of courage at a time. I'd been given the raw materials, a woman who refused to break, a brother who chose forgiveness over revenge, and my own stubborn refusal to stay dead inside. What we built from those materials was ours, imperfect, hard-won, real, and worth every scar it took to create it. The end.